Thank you for listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at DragonCon 2021. All right, so again, this is Tolkien's Trickster Tropes. I can talk at 2:30 on a Sunday. My name is Tara. I can be found across the web at A Geek Saga, and I am the founder and organizer of the first ever Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones convention in the U.S. It's called Ice and Fire Con, and I also do a couple webcasts / podcasts. They're both, honestly. One is the Geek Saga podcast, and the other one is called Sagas and Sass. It's like a genre literary webcast, and we actually do mostly fantasy right now. Like, we've covered the Grishaverse and Temur, I guess, is alternate history, and a bunch of other really good fantasy books. So check us out.
My name is J.R.R. Whited. I'm a writer. My big series is the Night Lord series, vampire, high fantasy, epic fantasy kind of thing. I have no idea why I'm here. They said, so what do you feel comfortable talking about?
We literally just pulled him off the hall.
I was sitting right out there, minding my own business. Hey, you like Tolkien? Yeah, come here. So yeah, so I'm sure we're all Tolkien fans. We all know the books. We probably all know the movies. So, hopefully we're going to, have a nice little discussion about how tricksy can those hobbits be, as well as all the other things that, turn out to be deceptive, trickstery type of things. But we're going to try and keep it low key.
And we're excited. We're excited to have Darren.
Thank you so much.
Darren, this is his first panel at DragonCon.
It is actually my second panel, but this is my first year that I've actually been a panelist as a professional here at DragonCon. My first panel was LOL, humor in apocalyptic literature. How funny can the end of the world be? You'd be surprised. Yes, you're correct.
Probably a Darren answer. So, yeah, and if you really like Darren, tell us, and maybe we'll invite him back. Oh, we will. I'm Jim Wirt. I'm a longtime DragonCon person, volunteer, been on the Tolkien track staff when we had that, been on this high fantasy when we merged all these high fantasy elements together, and I'm especially the guy, if you want Tolkien content, come talk to me, and we try to keep that as one of the load-bearing beams of high fantasy, along with some of the other fandoms. So, I just like talking Tolkien.
Yeah. So many T's. So alliterative. Okay, so, I feel like if you guys are all here, you know what a trickster is, but just, for a little bit of a refresher, not only is a trickster somebody who plays tricks, it's basically just a character that, is unconventional. They don't obey like the regular rules or laws. They don't exhibit conventional behavior. They question, sometimes even mock authority. And there's of course we all know Loki is literally probably the OG trickster, at least in mythology, religion, whatever. But Tolkien actually. It almost surprised me when I was doing a little bit of research for this panel to think, because the description I think said even Sauron in a way, and yeah, when you think back to how he was the necromancer, and not even Gandalf knew that for the longest time. So I guess I want to start off by asking my fellow panelists who your favorite trickster in this series, in the universe, the Tolkien universe, is.
Yeah, I would probably go with Sauron himself. He was a fantastic trickster in the sense that he deceived everybody, from Melkor, who in theory he was supposed to be working for and always planning to take over from, to the entire race of the Númenóreans. He worked his way into the confidence of King Pharazôn, persuaded him to send the entire Númenórean fleet into the lands of the Valar, claiming the Undying Lands will make you immortal. Okay, that was tricky. He got them to worship Melkor and turn away from the elves and the fair ones, the high ones, and all that kind of thing. You got the silver dome of the temple. He persuaded them to cut down the white tree and burn it. Okay, yeah, that's a trickster, all right. He's fooling everybody. And what's happening? He gets his own when the lands of the island of the Numenorians is overturned, and boy was he shocked at that, which he got what he deserved. He's a trickster. He was tricking. He was fooling everybody and doing it all his own way. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my favorite's Sauron.
Okay, I'm going to go in the completely opposite direction. And it kind of begs one of, what's the definition of a trickster? Does a trickster need to be out for world domination? Sauron kind of stuff. Does a trickster need to have sort of a selfish motivation? Sort of an egocentric, narcissistic thing? So, in arguing maybe not, one of the first tricksters we actually hit in Lord of the Rings is my man Sam Gamgee. If you think of it. Because Sam is this kind of just Rube Gardner guy who's actually been spying on all the stuff.
Dropping eaves.
He's not dropping no eaves.
Anything unnatural. So, and that's true. You see it some in the movies and even more in the books, because it turns out that at Crick Hollow, next to the Old Forest, there's the big reveal when Merry and Pippin and other hobbits tell Frodo they know what's been going on all along. Everything he thought was secret is not. And in fact, they're ready to leave the next morning because their chief spy, their chief trickster, the one his motivation is absolutely to support Frodo and
their informant.
They're an informant trickster, but he's kept it secret all the time. So when we can bridge there from the Gandalf and Sauron. So what about you?
So for me, weirdly enough, like if you'd asked me this question years ago, I probably would have had a different answer. But when I first read these, the first and I guess second, probably third times I read these books, I didn't really like at all was Tom Bombadil. But I just reread them this summer, and I was like, why didn't I like Tom Bombadil? Like, what was wrong with in her 20s Tara, So yeah, my answer now that I have, just crossed to the other side and realized how silly I was when I was younger is Tom Bombadil.
Excellent.
Like he's just, he's a kind soul, but he literally he just does his own thing, and that's all he does is be tricksy.
Cool. So, just quickly, you don't have to go to a microphone. We'll just call out names of other characters in the Legendarium that you think of as tricksters. Merry and Pippin. Okay.
Bilbo.
Yes, Bilbo for sure.
Bilbo Baggins. Bravest little hobbit of all. Any others?
Gollum.
Of course.
Gollum.
I think Gandalf was a trickster.
Yes.
Oh, for sure,
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely.
Trouble. The Frodo didn't need to get it.
He also defied Saruman, the white wizard who he's supposed to be reporting to, did it all his own way because I know best.
He honestly, The Hobbit is the best, if you ask me, is the best example of Gandalf's trickster attitude. Literally, he starts the book by inviting all these dwarves over to Bilbo's house and writing the symbol on the door, and then erasing it the next day, and and then he leaves them, when they go to Beorn's, yeah. I was like, am I pronouncing this correct? When they go to Beorn's, he tricks him too by having the dwarves show up one or two at a time. And then later in the novel, he comes back, after he's been gone for a while, right at the start of the Battle of the Five Armies, he comes back and he's just dressed as this old man, and Bilbo doesn't even realize he's there until Gandalf is like, "It is I, Gandalf," as he throws off his cloak. So
yeah, and so if the trickster trope is one of kind of working behind the scenes all the time, to an end which the trickster has a pretty good idea about what they want to happen. In The Hobbit, Gandalf keeps disappearing and goes off and does stuff like the White Council at Dol Guldur, places and people that we don't even know about. And yet, he's always working behind the scenes, never up front, the ultimate defeat of Sauron is his goal, his motive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and also, as people mentioned, of course, both Bilbo and Gollum. And here's a question. Obviously, I like, we know why they are, but what I want to know is the riddles. Is that the first thing that comes to your mind with Bilbo and Gollum, especially when you think of them being tricksters, or is it something else?
It's something else.
It's something else.
What is it?
The
What else
mind
is it?
game with the ring and traveling together
Yeah, that's what
when they're going through to get to destroy it.
Oh, especially when Bilbo's got the ring, but he's denying having it, and saying that he's a much better burglar than you thought because, hey, well, I don't have no magic ring, that kind of thing.
No, like when they're traveling to the mountain, like just him, Sam, and Gollum.
Oh, Frodo.
Oh, you're talking about Frodo.
Frodo.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Can you guys at the other end hear that? Okay. Otherwise, we'll repeat.
They say
comments.
no.
So that's interesting. Is the ring a trickster?
Well, I mean, yes. Yes.
I think the ring kind of has to be a trickster because it has no real power on its own. It can only exercise power through others, which means it has to be a trickster to persuade others to do its will, and by extension, Sauron's will.
Yeah, which obviously that's literally all the ring exists to
Yes,
do,
exactly,
is persuade others to do whatever it wants.
But can Gollum really be a trickster? Because a trickster, I would think, has more control over what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I feel like Gollum was being controlled.
Interesting. Can
So
can
I
Gollum
would
be a
not see
trickster?
him as a trickster at all.
Does a trickster have to be in control? Did you watch the Loki series?
But what I mean is they think they're in control of what it is that
Right,
they're trying to
right,
do.
they
Yeah.
think they are.
And I feel like Gollum was so controlled by the ring that
Right.
that in that sense, then maybe the ring is. But
Yeah,
I don't
which is an interesting question. Does a trickster have to be in control, or can a trickster be a victim?
Well, I
of
would
larger
think
things?
that Gollum could be regarded as a trickster after he lost possession of the ring, because at that point the ring no longer cared about him. It wasn't controlling him anymore. It was the leftovers of Gollum's addiction, dependency. His need for the ring was something that just existed at that point. He would never be free of it, but the ring didn't care about him anymore. And of course, when we wind up with a spoiler alert, when we wind up inside Mount Doom, the last thing the ring wanted was Gollum there.
Yeah, I see that hand in a minute. Certainly, after Gollum loses the ring, I think you can argue strongly he snaps into trickster mode. So the whole storyline about taking them through Kirith Ungol.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
maybe
Like
Shelob,
Shelob.
she can
Yeah.
do it.
Especially that,
Yeah.
How can I get the ring back? And he doesn't have the power to take it, for the most part. So he has to work his way to it. But all the time that he had the ring and was hiding underneath the mountains, no, he wasn't a trickster then. He was a slave to the ring.
Oh, I don't know though. I mean, was he though? Wasn't he though? Because he talks about how of course he was using the ring to do it, but he was living, in that in the goblin caves, and he would use the ring, of course, but he would go up behind them and snatch the goblins to eat them sometimes and stuff.
I think that's
and I guess
more
it's not really. I would say it's not trickstery, except that the goblins, they knew that there was something happening. They knew that there was someone there, but they couldn't see him. It was a secretive, it's like a, I don't know, there's a word I'm looking for that I'm blanking on right now, but
I don't think that was necessarily a trickster element so much as sheer survival.
that's right.
yeah.
Because if he shows up with a dozen goblins, he's dead, and he's got to avoid that at all costs. Even the invisible guy can't
Yeah.
cope with a whole squad of goblins.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to find something to eat, and it just happens to be goblin.
There you go.
What? I don't know. I couldn't find any fish. Got to be
The man in
goblin.
the hat.
One of those. Yeah.
I'd like to argue that a trickster has to a certain degree, be proactive. They can't be just reacting to
Okay, so the argument is a trickster has to be proactive, not
They have to have a
simply
plan.
reactive.
They got to have some ideal
Yeah.
that they're going for.
They
Yes.
have to be the ones who initiate the situation, and they continue to guide it. That's kind of the whole trickster's whole stick. If the trickster is the one reacting to everything that's going on, they're not in the mode of a trickster.
Yeah, they're trying to control the
There
situation
you are.
by tricking people into doing their will. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Over here.
Yes, would you say that Iluvatar is a trickster?
Iluvatar. Everybody know who Iluvatar is? When we say Iluvatar, Iluvatar, the creator.
Yeah, there are many instances within the Legendarium, especially in Lord of the Rings, where Iluvatar plays a hand in events that we don't know of, but the characters kind of hint at it. So Gandalf coming back, Frodo, for instance, having compassion on Gollum. And a lot of instances where Sam's decision to take the ring from Frodo in the cave.
One of the philosophical questions that raises is if something is an all-knowing being like Iluvatar in the Silmarillion, where they're creating the world and singing it into existence, and Melkor creates a disharmonious tune, so Iluvatar creates another tune, and Melkor ruins it again. But Iluvatar is totally content with that because he knows exactly how it's all going to play out. Is this being a trickster when this is fate? This is how it will occur. It's inevitable. I mean, not Thanos inevitable, real inevitable. Okay? So at that point, where does the trickster strives for control, but is always struggling to make his plans come out the way they should? But is it still being a trickster when I know exactly how this is going to go and nobody can stop it?
So I've got to read a quote because it's on my shirt.
Oh,
to the Iluvatar thing. And this is what Iluvatar says to Melkor. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful which he himself hath not imagined. Is that trickster area? I don't think so. I think it's like sovereign creator.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, I think that because he knows how everything is going to play out and has and has that sort of control, I would say no, but
to us it appears, however, that he could be trickster.
Yes,
because
yes.
we don't know everything.
Because there is a kind of curses foiled again.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have hands, eager hands.
Yes, this gentleman has had his.
Okay.
Back there, yeah.
What about
So shout it out.
We were worried that it was loaded.
down
Yes.
to a more smarmy character.
Smarmy.
Grima Wormtongue.
Grima.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. The whole room is like, oh.
He's just so icky.
So, Grima, hands up if you think he's a trickster. Hands up if you think he's not. So,
I think with Grima, it's like I think he has to be a trickster, but also he's really bad at it. Like, because the only person who actually is tricked by him is Theoden, but also he is controlling Theoden. You know what I mean?
He's a manipulator.
So, right? Yeah, I would. It's like I think I would say he's more of a manipulator, or just like I said, a very bad trickster. Because the only person who falls for his ish is I almost did it. The only person who falls for his ish is Theoden, really. Like
According to the book, most people fall for it, but not until Gandalf comes to borrow the horse are there like half of the people's eyes are open.
Yeah, right. He's worked his claws into the king, and through the king is exercising power without making it obvious that he's the one who is the power behind the throne now. And I think that's where he is being mostly a trickster in that sense, tricking people into doing his will by using the power of the king instead, to achieve his goals. Yes, but then later, yes, he's exposed.
You got some hands over there. We'll go the closest to us, and then the one in the back.
Back to the all-knowing guy.
Oh,
Iluvatar. Yeah.
Do you think the only difference between a trickster and a god is relative power, like amount of power and control they have over the world?
I don't, but
I think that does play partially into it. If your abilities extend to omnipotence, how can you be a trickster? Because how to put this? It seems to me that a trickster faces challenges and difficulties, and his outcome is never certain. He has to wonder, wait, if I do this, no, I should do this instead. He's playing chess, okay, with someone besides himself. See what I mean?
So if they gain power, are they still a trickster? Like if they become omnipotent?
I mean, do they have to be is, I think, the real question. Like, if you know everything and can control everything to that extent, then what is the need to be tricksy? Like, I guess if you just want to be, like, a little funny now and again, play around with people, maybe, but, I mean, I don't think that's what he is or he does.
And in the Tolkien verse, Iluvatar does precious little playing around with people. He's really a removed force and yet a sovereign force. And he's created Arda unmarred. And so it's not just power. There is a sense of rightness, goodness, completeness, beauty that's all part of this that Melkor mars. And that ripples through, like Tara said, all the music. and it creates all of these struggles for control, struggles to accumulate power, struggles to push back, even to the Second Age story where Anatar, Sauron's lie, there is no Iluvatar.
Mm-hmm.
He is actually a fiction of the Valar meant to exert power over you, and if you resist that, then you will have true power and true strength in a way. So Iluvatar is certainly being characterized as a trickster fiction of the Valar when it's really Sauron who's being the manipulator in that equation.
Yeah.
Let's go to Blue Mask over here.
In talking about Iluvatar and what constitutes a trickster, when you think about what influences Tolkien, very much Iluvatar was influenced in the concept of fate and providence and chance was influenced by Boethius's ideas. And so if you have control over the fate, and you're not fighting against the fate, that really affects if something is a trickster. But because those that are tricksters are, they don't have that knowledge of chance.
So yeah, did you all hear that?
No. Yeah, we should probably start using the microphones, guys.
Could you come up to the microphone?
Because like the constant repeating is gonna make this panel.
Yeah.
We only have an hour total, and no, it's okay. It's not your fault. We should have been making people do it immediately.
We should have started that right off.
And,
Yes,
and
yeah, much
the
better.
next one, could you?
Yeah,
come up to the
you'd wanna lean in real close.
Are we good? All right, okay. So when we're looking at what influences Tolkien, if we're trying to decide on what he considered a trickster versus what has full and complete power, Iluvatar was heavily influenced, and the music of the spheres was heavily influenced by Boethius. Oh, look at that. Now. I'll just talk really loud.
Yeah.
All right. So, since Tolkien's work and the music of the spheres and what controls, like has absolute power and control, is influenced by Boethius's concept of chance and fate and providence, when you're looking at a trickster, you're looking at.
Yeah, when I said you have to get close to these mics, I really meant it.
Now you're looking at something that does not know what that chance or fate looks like, and so. When you're trying to decide on a character from Tolkien's point of view, maybe not a postmodern point of view of what a trickster is, that's one of the things to look at is does it have control over fate?
It might not be so much about power, but so much about knowledge.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, control over fate. I mean, it's saying I don't believe in fate. I can control my own destiny, which is why I read my little quote about shall prove but my instrument thing. I think we're there.
I would say, like, going back to Gollum, like, I feel like Tolkien didn't also, like, just write about good tricksters, but also bad tricksters, because even though Gollum was completely insane because of the power of the ring over time, he still had a purpose in the movies and as a trickster. Like, I mean, once we got closer to Mount Doom, like he tricked Frodo into not believing in Sam anymore. Whenever Sam was someone that Frodo could always rely on, and almost got Frodo killed by the Arachnid, which I can't remember her name, but
Sheila.
right, yeah. And so maybe like Gollum wasn't necessarily like constantly conscious about all the decisions that he made, but he was definitely a trickster in my opinion.
And a very tragic figure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, fantastic Sauron cosplay. Just a completely random shout out. It introduces another idea, which is does there need to be room for a trickster to be redeemed? And we saw a little bit of that in the Loki series. And what is the power that redeems him? Gollum is an interesting example of that, because right up through even the pre-Shelob part of the story, you get the impression, and Tolkien actually writes about this in his letters, is it possible that Gollum, or what would have happened if Gollum had repented from his tricksterdom, sending the hobbits through Shelob's tunnels. And he seems to hold that out right up until this one scene where he startles Sam awake and he calls him names and a sneak. And
what if Sam hadn't?
And what if? And Tolkien plays that. What if Gollum had repented at that point? Could he have been redeemed? And in the movies, you see Frodo keeping asking that story because he has to believe that Gollum can be redeemed. And so in the Loki series, you get this sense of, is it possible that he could actually act honorably or be in love with someone other than himself?
I wonder if a trickster necessarily needs to be redeemed.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of them would need to be.
Oh, yeah.
There are plenty of examples of tricksters that, he's a lovable rogue, and I'm perfectly happy to have Han Solo in a completely different, fantasy universe there. But, sorry, I'm sliding back and forth on that.
I know.
But, yeah, still. You've got lovable Loki, for example. Yeah, he wanted Asgard. Absolutely. No question. But until he started actively plotting for the throne, I didn't have a problem with it. It was fine.
Well, I mean, and again, like, of course there are the Gollums and the Saurons and the Grimas, but we've already talked about, there are so many good, tricksters who they don't. I don't think Bilbo really needs to be redeemed from anything. I don't think Gandalf does either. And Gandalf, like, he is powerful, but he does not crave power.
Right.
So and I think that's something that Tolkien does really well, is write these characters who they are part of this trickster trope, but they're not bad. They're really just like they're like jokesters, I guess, like they're funny and they're fun and they're not out to harm anybody with their tricks and rarely do.
Let's go over here to the representative of Sauron.
There was an earlier mention about Bilbo as a trickster, and I really appreciated that because he's, to me, the original tricksy hobbit. You see that in earlier questions mentioned, a proactive and reactive sense, where he's a survivor to the core, using his wits to get out of situations like with the trolls or dealing with Gollum. But you also see him, having fun with it, like his birthday escape and things like that. All these things kind of combine to a sense of me of, him being a trickster at heart, if not for power or glory, but that's just how he operates.
How many other people trade riddles with a dragon and walk away?
But the question that leads me to it then is being a survivor, the key to being a trickster?
That's a great question. Is there a resilience necessary? So again, using the Loki initial. How many times can we kill this guy and he's not dead? Or take Bilbo in Smaug's lair, or Bilbo trapped in the Hobbit in Thranduil's
the palace in Mirkwood.
And figuring out how to get everybody out.
Well, I mean, and I hate using the word resilience, in tandem with the name Sauron, but again, like I mentioned earlier, when he was playing at being the necromancer, you know what I mean? Like nobody even knew who he was, and yeah, it's like they think they got rid of him, but ha ha ha, never mind, nope.
Yeah, I mean, literally, Tolkien defines his ages almost by, we finally got rid of the evil and that Sauron guy. And then, nope, the next age you figure out that he's still lingering around. He may be a flaming eyeball, but he's still around.
Over here, I think is next.
We kind of touched on it a little bit with Gandalf and him being the most visible of these, but I would kind of argue that all of the wizards kind of fall into this trope. They all show up on Middle-earth, like their mission is to operate behind the scenes, but then also each one immediately goes off and starts doing their own thing. Saruman, of course, winds up converting to the darkness and trying to like pretend like he's still on the White Council while still actively scheming behind the scenes to work for Sauron. And then like Radagast is not so much a trickster, but he is very like countercultural and he is anti-authority because he shows up with these instructions to aid like elves and men or whatever, looks around, sees all the drama and is like, forget that, I'm gonna go hang out with squirrels and birds because they're these people. And then doesn't do anything else. And blue wizards we have to assume, but I kind of think all of the wizards fit into this trope.
Oh, and I mean with Saruman, I mean he when he goes and he tricks the Ents, right? So I mean even without the whole idea that all of the wizards probably are just tricksters by their whole general like job and everything that they do, there are other specific examples outside of Gandalf that aren't nice either, where it's very clear that they're using their nature, their tricksy nature to make these things happen behind the scenes.
It speaks to the means by which they accomplish their things. So when the Istari, the wizards, are sent to Middle-earth, they're prohibited from fully exercising their power in a controlling way.
Because they're not actually human beings.
Right, they're Maya. They're kind of archangel type.
Yeah, they're more like the Maya than
exactly.
than anything else.
Exactly. And so as a result, and you can see this especially in Saruman, it's their means or their facility in persuasion. That is, especially in the use of words, which is incredibly important to Tolkien.
And it's kind of Saruman's trademark symbol. Beware the power of his voice.
Mm-hmm. and that's so his seduction, his manipulation is especially associated not so much until he starts building his army, really in Mordor.
Once he starts producing Uruk-hai, he stops really being a trickster and starts thinking in a military fashion. Yeah. It's straightforward, it's to the point, we're going to go kill everybody and take over. Exactly. And then when it finally falls back to, okay, I'm screwed, out comes the power of the voice in an attempt to trick his way out of Orthanc, which of course hasn't worked on Treebeard, so now we got humans. Let's try it on them.
So if you're only reading the movies, may I encourage you to read the book, especially the scouring of the Shire scenes and the chapters up to it, because it's illustrative of how far Saruman has fallen in his impotence as a trickster.
Yes.
Because he does persuade the whole Shire, except when our four heroes get back, and Gandalf steps back, says, you guys got this. You can handle it. And Sauron is unveiled and ultimately killed by another one of those tricksters we said. Sorry, spoilers.
Right, go ahead.
It's not Legolas money.
I was just going to add one more thing about Saruman, and that was going to be that he's not only tricking on the good side, he's tricking on the bad side too.
Right, yeah.
Oh yeah, he's a traitor every single direction.
Yeah,
you betcha.
Every direction.
That's right. He's an equal opportunity trickster.
Over here.
So the trickster trope in cultures that weren't even in Tolkien's brain when he was creating his world, one of the things with the trickster is it's not purely evil or purely good. Like the joy of interaction is like its own separate thing from a moral balance. But on the meta level, the purpose is for the trickster character helps another character either learn something or reveals a character trait about them. So if someone's playing a trick on you, but it doesn't make you any better at what you're doing in the plot, that's not necessarily a trickster situation happening. It's just someone kind of being a bit of an ass.
Right. Is it
It's
going
a consideration
somewhere?
on like where the line falls on when someone's a trickster or not.
Yeah, I think it's like we did a Tricksters in Game of Thrones virtual panel last year, and it was really a lot of like. It's almost hard to like if you really keep delving deep and deep and deep into these things, like you can convince yourself one way or the other that a character is or is not a trickster. Like you can almost it's like almost always, maybe not all the time, but almost always find some little like thing that they did, and it's like, well, maybe at that one point they were a trickster.
I forget. I think we're on this side.
Yes, we're on this side.
Yeah, so I was actually going to expand on that. I had wondered at what point do you stop being just subversive, just strategic, and just narcissistic to being actually a trickster? Like, where's the transition point, or is there one, especially within like Tolkien literature?
I think being a trickster, predominantly, if we're going to draw a line, there's a line in the sand. Beyond this, you're a trickster. I think really leans more toward the question of what are you trying to accomplish, and are these your only means to accomplish it? Saruman, again, in the early phases, he's an Astari sent to the Middle Earth in order to try and defeat Sauron. I mean, that's their goal when they get there. And he is the first one there, the leader of the Astari, and he establishes himself and then proceeds to talk other people into doing stuff, gather information here, do the other thing, and to some extent he is a trickster at that point. Mainly because he then starts to really lust after the ring and seek it, at which point he's deceiving everybody around him. He can't take them. He can't conquer them. He has to dissemble and lie. That's trickstery, sure, yeah. And then, of course, he stops using his trickster tactics when he moves into straight-up military conquest. He's not a trickster then, clearly. And then when he doesn't have that power anymore, he falls back on something that requires less power and more talking. And so he crosses the line back and forth. And that's kind of somewhere in there's a line. I'm not sure where, but it's somewhere in there. So.
Yeah. I think there's some combination of, I want to say a hidden agenda or a deeper agenda.
Yeah, a hidden goal.
Yeah, combined with
an inability to force the goal.
Yeah, and then some kind of influence. I'm playing with whether or not a trickster is allowed to recruit allies, or if a trickster has to mostly operate in a solo mode.
I would argue that a trickster can manipulate allies.
Yes, yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So I'm backing off of my Sam then. He would never manipulate.
Well, I mean,
never.
You know, like we like I said a little bit ago, like you can have a character that acts like a trickster from time to time, but isn't necessarily like doesn't follow every every bit of that trope. Yeah, like everybody. I mean, again, like I would say Gandalf is a trickster. Do I think Sam can be tricksy? Sure. Do I think he's a trickster? I would lean personally toward no, but also I mean I think as with any books, media, whatever, we all have unless there is an author telling us this is exactly how it is, and even then it's like you don't necessarily have to listen to that. Like if you are reading it and you see something in a specific way, then that is your take on it, and not everybody is going to have the same take or agree with each other or even the author from time to time. So.
Okay, hi, sorry, this was a quick question here. What I wanted to ask is, you have a situation, as though you guys have described as the panel, where you have a character who is under the influence of something else, and yet chooses to deceive for his own selfish reasons and puts others in danger in that matter. And that character is Frodo. And I've noticed that nobody has mentioned that Frodo, at the end of the day, is about to go drop that ring in. Like, okay, we went through all of this just to drop this ring in. And he tells Sam, oh, it's okay, you just wait in the back, I'll be good. Like, I'll be good. Like, we're good. And then yet, he deceives Sam, his best friend. But does that mean he's under the influence of the ring?
I think so.
Does that mean that he himself has become a trickster?
Well, yes and no in some respects. I think he is deeply under the influence of the ring, especially at the end when he's looking at it and considering whether to throw it into the lava. He was standing where Isildur stood, and the power of the ring is at its greatest in the heart of the mountain. Nobody can throw it in. On the other hand, telling Sam, "No, I'm pressing on. I'm going to go do this," was partly, I think, the ring's doing, because you can turn good to evil, persuading Frodo that your friend does not need to take these last few steps into the heart of a fiery mountain with you. This is your job. Sam, you've come far enough. I've got this now. See what I mean? So I'm not sure that Frodo qualifies as a trickster at that point, so much as he's trying to be the good guy, and the ring is using that against him and all of Middle-earth.
Okay, so the ring would be the trickster in that case.
The ring would be the trickster, yes.
Okay, so inanimate objects can be tricksters in stories.
Does the ring count as inanimate?
Yeah, I don't think a completely inanimate object can do that, could be considered that. But yeah, like the ring, it has a power all its own,
The
and
haunted ring can be a trickster.
Yeah, but the ring is ultimately invested with the power of Sauron.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's an extension of Sauron's personality and his power and his will to dominate all life.
It is the foundation of Barad-dûr.
But it's a fascinating question. I think I'm with the panel up here that says Frodo is not a trickster. He's an addict who has been completely overwhelmed.
And a pawn.
You remember that, if you've seen the Stephen Colbert little thing, where he says, there's no way that Frodo is going to be able to throw that ring in the fire. Because Gandalf, tried to get him to throw it in his own little hobbit hearth out there, and he couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. And then he said, "I've thought about this even more than Gandalf. He's not thinking this through." So I think Frodo was lost that way, and I think Sam has been saying all along he doesn't expect to get home. He's expecting to die at Orodruin, at the cracks of Dune as well. So it's
win or lose, he knew he was going to die,
Yeah.
but he was determined to die trying.
Yeah.
So.
And so that was what he's pushing against.
This side. Okay. That's fine. You're first. He says you're first.
I think the TARDIS is better.
And you're new because
So my question is, or maybe for the Tolkien scholars in deeper canon, is there any dwarfs or elves, or they seem to be missing in the whole trickster
That is
conversation?
true.
Is that something
Yeah.
that Tolkien was conscientious about? Or?
Mim is where I was going to go.
From the Silmarillion,
exactly.
Yes. He was a hill dwarf.
And he was isolated and had his own little clan.
Yeah,
and he was.
it didn't have much of a clan after he encountered.
Turin.
Turambar. Yeah. He was definitely tricksy at that point.
Yeah.
I don't think he didn't live like a trickster. He had a nice, honest, he had his mind. He collected food and all that kind of, just got by. But when faced with a superior force, he immediately went into full-on trickster mode.
Yeah.
To survive. Yeah. So there's a dwarf right there. As far as elves are concerned,
I would say Elrond.
Is Elrond a trickster?
Whenever he actively was going to let Arwen lead on the elves without saying that she was going to have a child with Aragorn, even though she says you saw my child.
yeah, he's not saying anything about it and encouraging her to go to the Great Havens anyway. Yeah. Oh yes. Forging or healing some of the rift between the dwarves and the elves by that, manipulating two great races. Yes.
One of the most self-isolated elves in the Silmarillion is Turgon, Gondolin.
Turgon, yeah.
I don't know if he would qualify as a trickster, although he's
He hid
basically
an
trying
entire
to be
city.
hidden from everyone. Yeah.
I mean, again, I think that falls back on you can always find a little the something that somebody has done at some point, but I think that the elves are very I mean, shoot, even the dwarves. I would say that it would maybe be easier to find a dwarf who was a straight up trickster than an elf. And also I think for me it's hard because even though I just reread the books, I've watched the movies so many times that that version of the elves is cemented in my brain, and to the point where when I was rereading the books this summer, I was like, wow, Elrond is he's real just way chiller in the books than he is in the movies. And so I think again, you can absolutely come up with here's a tricksy thing they did, or they were tricksy at this time, because they wanted to get their way. But I think overall, Tolkien writes both the elves and the dwarves like very straight.
Ale the Dark Elf.
Ale the Dark Elf, yes. That would be a great example.
Much more of an elvish trickster. Yes, very good. Thank you.
Lived alone in the forest.
Yeah.
Begged his wife to kidnap her.
Yeah.
Yada yada. Great night.
Good catch. He wasn't exactly, in the elfdom's, Hall of Fame. And then his offspring and the
betrayal of
Gondolin. That's absolutely a good example. Because mostly, and this is true of both dwarves and elves, which is why they have such problems with one another, is they know what they want and they tend to go for it. The elves are a little more subtle than that. The dwarves are much less subtle than that. But if you need subtlety and subterfuge and
don't go to
influence, you don't tend to go to elves and dwarves for that, unless but you do have exceptions. There are good examples of those. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was a great lead-in for what I was going to bring up, where one of the joys of, I started in the movies and went to the books and things like that, and discovering things like the poems, the songs and things like that, and the insight they give into the different cultures. Are there any songs that Tolkien wrote, either in the main works or the expanded works, which celebrate a trickster hero rather than, say, a tragic one or iconic?
The only songs I can think of are when the elves are singing when Bilbo first comes down into Rivendell, and they're. Yeah. So is Tom Bombadil a trickster?
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But mostly the songs and poems are legendary and epic and
sad.
But you're right. I think you could make the argument that the song that the elves are singing when Bilbo is going down into Rivendell it's basically about him. He is a trickster, so there's that. But I think that's probably the closest.
And the fact that they know his name and he's never met them before.
Yeah.
They've heard about him from Gandalf. Haven't they?
Yeah. Probably.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That trickster.
Sneaky hobbits.
Over here.
I just had another character to throw into the pot. Ungoliant, tricking Malfoy
Ooh.
with the tree.
Ungoliant.
I'm not sure Ungoliant was really tricking so much as following through on the deal.
Ungoliant is?
Melkor made a deal with Ungoliant to kill the two trees and drink up all the light from them. But when he didn't want to pay up, that's when it became important. But,
Ungoliant. You guys know Ungoliant. You think Shelob's bad?
Yeah.
that was the first.
Boy Scout, Girl Scout, whatever Shelob is. Yeah, Ungoliant's. Yeah. Ungoliant is unbridled power.
And
there is
hunger.
nothing subtle about Ungoliant.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, Shelob is just trying to live her best life in her cave, and she needs food sometimes, okay? Like, you can't hate on that spider for just needing to eat.
You can hate on Ungoliant, however, because she would have drunk the world dry.
Yes, exactly.
And still been hungry.
My question's more about what do you think is like a good foil to a trickster? And in a lot of stories, like a hero has a foil in either their companion or a villain. And a trickster has a lot of qualities that you think you could almost term as opposite. Like, what do you think can make like a good, like, do you think there are foils of tricksters in Lord of the Rings? And if so, like, or The Hobbit, if so, like, what do you think makes a good foil?
The foil for them. So, so you said we're looking for the Lokis in the Lord of the Rings. Is that like a Thor in the Lord of the Rings?
So everybody needs a straight man?
A straight man? Aragorn? Yeah.
The good, solid, stolid character. I mean, the traditional view of Samwise, for example. Always there, always faithful, never going to do anything, never going to put a foot wrong, absolutely. And then again, the Thor-Loki dynamic there. You've got the other person, not Frodo, obviously, but still, the trickster in question would then, of course, be out there doing whatever the trickster does, and I've got my henchman right here. That's my foil. See? Everybody needs a henchman.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that. Do I think there are balances? For sure, you know what I mean. But it's when Tolkien is putting two characters together, I think it's rare. I mean, like Gandalf, he kind of operates on his own most of the time. I mean, Bilbo, same, honestly. He's with the dwarves, but he is really on his own for a lot of their journey. So having, while there are absolutely foils in there are more serious characters balancing out, or even, I guess, like Sauron being a kind of more serious trickster. There's always a balance, but I don't know. Like, I don't know. Do you know more than I do, so you might be able to come up with a better, like, here are two characters that are together a lot, or that this one is clearly a foil of this character who is a trickster.
Tolkien does work with dualities a lot. And so you have the Sauron, or Saruman Gandalf duality. So much so that Gandalf ultimately becomes Gandalf the White instead of Saruman the White. And so that kind of works. Who is countering Sauron in our trickster mode? Well, kind of pretty much everybody in the first, second, and third age, especially the second and third age. In The Lord of the Rings, I think you could probably argue that Aragorn is Sauron's counter when he challenges him with a palantir and shows him the ring, the sword that sliced the ring off with his finger. Spoilers. And so you get that. What's interesting to me on that duality question is Gollum, because he has an internal duality. And you get this Gollum versus Smeagol kind of a thing, and they're both corrupted, but they're kind of at war with one another. So, and there's almost this internal Jungian tension that's going on with those characters. And I bet if we kept going down the line, we could figure out, who's Grima's offset and so on. Yeah, but it's a fun thing to think about.
Your turn.
In our conversations here, we've talked about how tricksters typically, they're tricksters because at least while they're being a trickster, don't have power to manipulate events themselves, to conquer events without the subterfuge. So with Glaurung the dragon in the Turin tale, who does have power, I mean, he basically walks in and
he does,
kills everybody.
yes, absolutely.
But his favorite weapon is chaos. He creates it wherever he goes, and then he strikes with brute force when he can. But he likes just to cause havoc by a word here and there.
Yeah.
So does he fall into the trickster category, or is he in some other category beyond that?
I think he's a dragon. He's being lazy.
Interesting. But that's a fascinating theory, because we think of dragons as teeth like swords, and my tail is a hurricane wings, and I fire.
And then you get into the riddle contest and start going.
But Glaurung had the ability, by looking at you, to make you forget who you were, which is exactly what happened to Turambar's sister. And then spoilers.
I would argue
he
that
ends up
he's
marrying her, and it's a very bad ending. But it's not because he's torn them limb from limb or blasted them with fire.
Yeah.
I think what we're getting at there is that Glaurung's goal there was not to rend someone limb from limb.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's over quickly. We're going to make you suffer.
Yeah.
See, and that's why, again, a lot of the trickster trope comes back to the motive of the trickster as well.
Yeah.
But what are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? And as far as Turin was concerned, this was worse than finding the burned remains of his sister. When he finally figured out what was actually going on, that was just heartbreaking. Absolutely. So I think it was Glaurung's goal the entire time. So yeah, definitely Glaurung couldn't achieve that by fire and claw. So we're going to get tricksy.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example too, because then you can balance it with Smaug, who he literally took the things with the fire and the claw and the tooth, and
he's mine now.
He might have had his little riddly conversation with Bilbo, but that does not make Smaug a trickster. No. Versus there is this other dragon who actually did that, like actually lived that trickster life.
That's right.
I was gonna say, on that note, we are close to 3. Oh, we got 4. Oh, we got 4 minutes. Okay, I was gonna say.
So we'll take anybody else, but I'm going to do a cold call to my professor friends in the third row, Constance and Laura, who've been on other panels, and if you didn't get those, you should come next year, because we will definitely be inviting them back too.
Is this our version of phone a friend?
So this is Constance, and this is Laura, also Tolkien experts. Any contributions to other tricksters or to what we've been talking about from you guys? And you probably could come up to the mic if you would be willing.
Oh, you're going to make me get up and
We're going to make you work for it.
No, I think that you covered most of what I was thinking, but when you mentioned Frodo, I was appalled and wanted to rip your heart out. Because the answer to that is no, he is not. He is controlled at that point. But I think bringing up Tor Tumbr, that was really excellent. And Gollum is an excellent example of somebody with his own duality, as you're pointing out. And so the real balance in there is Smeagol, who is trying to hold on to the shreds of his humanity, as it were, in the light of everything that's happened to him. And Frodo brings some of that back to the fore, and then it goes away again at that point. So I think that looking at the dragons is an interesting concept. You covered most of the things that I would think of. You know, I tend to, if something else occurs to me eventually, you know, you can find me on Facebook.
Well, you mentioned like Smeagol, and I guess you know, my question there is knowing what we know of his past, and it's not a lot, obviously, but knowing what we know of Smeagol before the ring, before Gollum existed, he was a little trickster himself too, you know, like just from the start. Honestly,
he was not the nicest of hobbits. If the ring could already persuade him to
right,
strangle somebody.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We'll go to Laura, and then we'll have one more, and I think that will wrap us up.
So I guess I'm pretty much in agreement with Constance. I'm not necessarily thinking of other characters that haven't already been mentioned. And I think where I come down in my thinking on this, for the most part, is a point that has come up several times, you know, from the panel, which is that, you know, a moment of manipulation or a moment of deceptiveness does not make one a trickster.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a pattern of behavior to
yes,
be a trickster.
yes, exactly.
And I think also the element of chaos is one that's one of the people from the audience brought that up, and I think that is something that's also interesting to look at.
Right.
But it does come back to what you've already talked about, which is the motivation.
Right, right. Which is, you know, Melkor motivation, introducing chaos into the music. Interesting.
Well, I mean, and also like having that element of chaos. That doesn't mean that a character doesn't have a plan. I mean, Loki is chaotic, but he still has things that he wants and goals he wants to achieve. So you can be a trickster, you can be chaotic. I mean, Gandalf is chaotic at times, but he also has like he has these things that he wants to achieve too. So I think it's like just because just because you need that element of chaos doesn't mean that it has to rule all the things.
We got one over here.
Just a quick thought that I had in regards to a foil to a trickster. That a foil to a trickster doesn't have to be a straight man. A foil to a trickster is often another trickster. Case in point, like Bilbo and Gollum with the riddles, or Saruman and Gandalf. It's who's trying to out-scheme the other one, who's got a better plan.
Well, there's somebody who's been watching this Loki also. Constance gets the last word.
I get the last word, me for the last word. No, the one thing that I was thinking of the entire panel, though, is I kept thinking about the idea of trickster with a capital T, and it's almost like a god title, and that's kind of how I see it. I know we're talking about it on levels where people and your own humanity, but some things will make you human when you do it once in a while. But I tend to think of trickster as a title, in which case would be people with the more supernatural or spiritual bent that's corrupted or manipulated. That's how I see it also.
So there's corruption too. Yeah, interesting.
Okay, I'll sit down.
No, that's a good point. I really like that point, because that actually, if we drill it down to that and we say trickster with a capital T, that really just helps you decide, like, okay, well, this character can be, and all of these can't.
That's why I brought up Sauron, because he's got a whole history of things that he's done. He saw with the Huon, the Hound. He thinks, oh, there's a prophecy that it won't die except by the greatest werewolf that ever lived. I'll turn into a werewolf. That'll be me. No, wrong. You know, and he tries all sorts of things. Yes, but he's a trickster all through the thing until again he finally thinks he's got the military might to force it
Yeah.
I don't need to fool anybody now. I got orcs.
And so another panel in the high fantasy track comes to an end. Thank you for coming. As you've heard
Yes,
here,
thank you guys. Thank you for listening to the Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out other Geek Saga entertainment endeavors, including the Sagas and Sass webcast and podcast and Ice and Fire Con.